When we behave in such a way as to actually bring about our expected results, we call this the self-fulfilling prophecy. And contrary to popular belief, this is actually a scientific phenomena. Now, a self-fulfilling prophecy is actually a way of keeping our model of the world stable, which helps life be more predictable and helps us feel more certain. When things outside of our expectations happen, it can actually feel very unfamiliar and disturbing. Now, if we're always looking for evidence that we're right, you will keep acting in such a way as to make what you're expecting more likely. For example, I've seen people talk themselves out of opportunities that they've been offered. I've seen people giving up on a dream because they were focused on all the things that weren't working instead of learning from those aspects and focusing on the things that were working, or all the reasons to keep going. Ultimately, you're trying to prove yourself right all the time, and you will find a way to prove yourself right if that is your expectation. Another phenomena is called the Pygmalion effect, the power of positive expectations. Now, here's another example of the law of confirmation bias at work. Robert Rosenthal, an American psychologist, spent his entire career investigating something that he called the Pygmalion or Rosenthal effect. And it was all about the power of our expectations. One of the very first experiments was performed on rats who were put through a maze and timed for their ability to, or their speed, to get to the end of the maze. And researchers randomly assigned one of two labels to the rats. Some of the rats were classified as dumb rats, and some of the rats as smart rats. After a period of time, the rats' progress was measured, and to everybody's great surprise, the smart rats did better in the maze than the labelled dumb rats. This led Robert Rosenthal to perform many more experiments that demonstrated the power of our positive expectations and also the power of our negative expectations. One famous experiment in the classroom demonstrated that when teachers had high expectations for certain pupils, those students gained in IQ points and did better in exams than for those whom they had no particular expectations. They observed that when we have higher expectations for people, more positive expectations, we behave towards those people in very specific ways. And in doing so, we provoke the response that we're looking for. This can also happen when we have negative expectations. So let's consider the implications of this. Let's say you have to meet with somebody next week, and a helpful colleague takes the time to give you their full assessment of the individual. They tell you all about them. Now, because of the law of confirmation bias, once you label someone, everything that they do or say will further convince you that your label was right. Because we're looking for evidence that this assessment or expectation is correct. And more frighteningly, we would distort information to make it fit. Now, more critically, we're now behaving towards them in such a way as to provoke the evidence that we're right. And in doing so, we will reinforce any of that behavior that we see that's in alignment with our expectations. Now, this is incredibly unfortunate for the person who's been labeled negatively. But if you're someone who's finding somebody else's behavior challenging and you recognize that you've labeled that person's behavior or that person, you cannot change them. You cannot change them whilst you maintain that label. You've literally trapped them in that behavior because you cannot change your opinion of them whilst that label stands. You will continue reinforcing the behavior that you expect and distorting any evidence. Even if they try to change, you will still distort evidence to fit in with your expectations. So if you want somebody to change, You have to start by changing your label for them. And you have to do that in a very genuine and authentic way. It can't be by, pretending to give them the benefit of the doubt. You genuinely need to be able to see them differently in order to get them to change. And you can do so without even ever having a conversation with them, which is quite exciting. And later on in this program, I will show you how to do that.